Hi, everyone, and welcome to Azincourt Energy's live corporate webinar. This is Will Mays from RB Milestone. Azincourt Energy is a Canadian-based resource exploration and development company focused on the alternative fuels and energy sector. The company's core projects are in the clean energy space, with exploration projects in the world's premier jurisdictions for uranium mining. The shares are traded on the TSXV under the symbol AAZ, and on the the OTCQB under the symbol AZURF. Joining us today is the company's president and CEO and director, Alex Klenman, and Trevor Perkins, VP of Exploration. We'll be going through Azincourt's investor presentation. This will include an overview of current operations, recent achievements, and upcoming milestones. At the end of the presentation, we'll open up for Q&A for management to address, and if you're interested in asking a question or logged into the Zoom app or web platform, you can submit your questions to us directly in the Q&A module. Please note this presentation is being recorded today, Thursday, February 9th, and will soon be available on the company's website at azincourtenergy.com. Today's call may contain forward-looking statements that are subject to risks and uncertainties that may cause actual results, performance, or developments to differ materially from those contained in the statements and are not guarantees of future performance of the company. No assurances can be given that any of the events anticipated by forward-looking statements will occur, or if they do occur, what benefits the company will obtain from them. Also, some risks and uncertainties may be out of control of the company. Azincourt has a full disclaimer contained in their presentation. Lastly, RBMG is not a registered investment advisor or broker-dealer. For more information, please visit rbmilestone.com. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Alex Klenman, Chief Executive Officer and Director, and Trevor Perkins, VP of Exploration of Azincourt Energy. Gentlemen, the stage is yours.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Will. And thank you for those in attendance. Today, we're going to go through the deck. We're going to discuss the current operations, as Will mentioned, at our East Preston project, our plans moving forward, and some other interesting tidbits. And certainly we're here to answer questions. So first of all, and forgive us if you're really familiar with Azincourt, there'll always be some people involved in these events that are really just discovering us for the first time. So we'll go through some introductory slides. Azincourt, as you know, is a uranium exploration and development company. We trade on the TSX Venture under the symbol AAZ or AAZ for our Canadian friends, and on the QB under the symbol AZURF. There's our standard disclaimer. Everybody's read these before. You'll notice, however, at the bottom that all the technical information has been reviewed and approved by Trevor, who's our PGO on the project, our qualified person. We chose this sector many years ago, back in 2013, 2014, when the company came to life. There was always going to be a looming supply deficit, and that is coming to pass. Things tend to develop slower than we would all like, but there's no doubting the supply-demand scenario that this sector faces. So we'll brush through these slides. I'm sure most people who have an interest in the uranium sector understand these basic facts. In terms of management, I've been involved since the summer of 2017. I was a shareholder of the company first. I knew the former chairman, Ian Stalker, and through Ian got involved on the management side. We got Trevor involved almost 2 years ago now. We needed someone who has made significant discoveries and leading teams that have made discoveries, and he has done that. You can read that in his bio. Trevor knows the basin. It's his backyard. He lives in Saskatoon, so worked there extensively over the years. Ted O'Connor and Paul Reynolds are both geologists. They give us an independent view from their seats on the board, and Vivian is our CFO. All of us do our requisite work, and we're happy to have Ted, Paul, and Vivian part of the team. We know, again, these are kind of outdated slides, but nothing's really changed since we put them together. There are more reactors in the pipeline than ever before. When they all come online, they're going to need the fuel to do what they do to generate clean energy, and we're in the business of finding those deposits. We have two projects to mention here today. One is the East Preston project in Saskatchewan. We almost have 80% of this. It's a 25,000 hectare project located in the western side, the southwestern side of the basin. And we have a newer deal we put together last year, the Hatchet Lake project, which is in the northeastern side of the basin, on the Wollaston corridor, where all the production is in the Athabasca. So we'll address both of those projects today. We have really anchored ourselves in the Athabasca mainly for these specific reasons. It is the largest, it is a world-class district with the largest, highest grade deposits in the world. You know, many multiple times the world average, great history of mining in the area and a stable political climate. And one thing I want to mention too is more engaged First Nations in the area as well. So we're really in a great spot. There really is no other place to be if you're serious about looking for uranium and mining it. Here it's as of January, some of the market caps in our neighborhood, the East Preston neighborhood specifically. You'll see immediately that we share borders with a couple of $1 billion market caps, Next Gen and Uranium. So, you know, if you're a small junior micro cap, though, that's always a wonderful thing to you know, buddy up against big caps. Everyone's in our neighborhood. Cameco, Fission, Denison, they're all in the area. So this is heating up this particular area, specifically on the Fission 3.0 discovery, just east of or west of us. And to mention a little bit more about the East Preston tenure, there's 25,000 hectares as part of a larger Preston project. Orano and Sky Harbor are the partners to the west of us on Preston. We have East Preston. The active partners are Sky Harbor and ourselves. We have now 78%. That'll increase with this the current program that we're under right now. So we're really happy. This is a grade A exploration project in the right place, and we have the majority of the project. And I'm going to hand this over now to Trevor to go through the technical slides. We'll try not to be too technical, but it is important that you understand the importance and the significance of the work we've done to date, all of the different geophysical and geochemical work that we've done, and the limited drilling to this point, and why it's critical, why it's important, and why it's impactful. So Trevor, away you go, and let me know when you want me to change the slides for you.
Thank you, Alex. So I'm just going to give a brief summary of a little bit of the history of the project here, just to help understand how we got where we are now. So when we started working the project, initially airborne surveys were run over the entire project. And the purpose of these was to help us identify where areas of increased conductivity in the rocks exist. These are the types of features you want to find to start with, to know where you've got conductive bodies. And the main reason for this is that typically uranium deposits seem to be associated with these areas of conductivity. So it's one of your first order criteria you want to look for in the basin. So as you can see on this slide, we identified two main corridors through the center of the project, running in an approximately northeasterly direction. We've got our AG trend and our KHQ trend just to the east of it. And also on this slide, you can see to the west of our two main corridors, we've got a lot of shorter strike length corridors as well that are running parallel to these main corridors. And to the east, we've got a few conductive sort of like bullseye targets. Now, all of these are valid targets that will have to be explored at some point. So as you can see, there are no shortage of targets on the property. So next slide, Alex.
Trevor, just real quick, what is the strike length of those the two main trend?
Combined, you're looking at between 20 and 25 kilometers of conductor length to be tested.
Yeah, so it gives everybody an idea of scale, right?
Yeah.
Okay, next slide. There you go.
So once we identify the conductive corridors in the with the airborne surveys, we then have to go in on the ground, and we run ground-based surveys over these conductive corridors, because we need to know exactly where within that package the actual conductive rock units exist. Just to help focus in, because I mean, in the airborne surveys, these can be several hundred meters wide, and so you need to know where in that you want to focus. Otherwise, you're drilling a lot of drill holes for no potential gain. So we run ground-based surveys, typically on a grid pattern over these conductive corridors. This slide shows the results of some of these surveys over the AG and the KHQ trends. And what you can see here is you'll see the straight parallel lines. Those are our grid lines that we ran the survey on, of course. You'll see a black wavy line cutting across the grid that identifies where the actual conductive package within that corridor exists. And the ground-based surveys, we can usually get that down to, you know, plus or minus 25 meters, knowing where that conductive package is, which gives us lots of confidence to drill the target. Now, the shaded color in the background, that's gravity that we ran at the same time. And the idea of the gravity survey, it shows us where the rocks are less dense. So it's showing us either where they've been broken apart by structures or where they're altered, and that softens up the rocks and makes it easier for fluids to flow through it as well. So what we like to see is where we've got a conductor, where we've got a lower gravity signature right on top of each other. It shows us we potentially have a conductor, our graphitic packages, and we would have structure and alteration at the same time. So a way to get the fluids into the rock interacting with our conductive package. Next slide, Alex. So we'll look quickly here at the AG trend. Prior to the last 2 years worth of programs, all the previous work done amounted to about 24 holes, mostly focused on the A and AB zones, just barely getting the top of the G zone. So previous drilling showed us we were starting to see elevated uranium. We have good graphitic packages. That's the right lithologies. We're seeing the right rocks. We're seeing good structures coming through the area. So we're starting to tick off the boxes. So like say there's a checklist we sort of like to follow, things we like to see to know that we're in the right area. And we're checking off those boxes now with elevated uranium. We know we've got uranium floating in the system. We know we've got good lithologies. We know we've got good structures. We're also seeing some rare earths in our geochem as well. And we're seeing elevated nickel, cobalt, copper, zinc. These are all nice base metal pathfinders. Typically the fluids that carry the uranium also tend to carry a lot of base metals as well. So when you're seeing the elevated base metals, you know you've got the right fluids in the area. And when you're starting to see them dropping out into the rocks, it's a better possibility that your uranium is going to be dropping out nearby as well. Next slide, Alex. So last year we ran our biggest project up to that point on the property. We drilled 19 holes for approximately 5,000 meters, focused on the G zone, the K zone, and the H zone. In all three of these zones, we intersected good hydrothermal alteration, showing us we've got nice metal-bearing fluids, iron-bearing fluids flowing through the system, and leaving their mark on the rocks, I guess you could say. So these three alteration zones totaled approximately 1,700 meters, split between the south end of the G zone, all through the K zone, and the north end of the H zone. And that's as far as we had gotten into the H zone at that point. So very likely that the alteration zone continues on. Next slide, Alex. So this is just a schematic here to sort of show why we focusing in on the alteration and sort of what the alteration means as well. There are some interesting words on here that are a little bit more technical, but I'll try to summarize it in the way that it makes sense for everybody. So in the blues, now start with this slide. It shows our typical model we look for all unconformity based uranium deposits. Now, where we are located on the East Preston project, we only see everything below what's shown as the unconformity here. All of our sandstone, which would be above the unconformity on this slide, has been removed through the last several million years of erosion and glaciation and such like that. So we're only seeing basement rocks. We don't see the sandstone. But what this slide shows is we typically have two basic models depending on where the fluids are moving. We have on the left, you can see a model where fluids are moving from the basement up into the sandstone through the fracture systems and graphitic packages. In these cases, you'd see a large clay halo in the sandstone, which is your blue and oranges. And then you'd start to see a little bit more chlorites and clays as well in the basement, which is our red zone. Now, typically, if you're going to see uranium mineralization, it's going to be in the areas indicated in red, where we're seeing our chlorite and other clays happening as well. And that's typically where our hydrothermal hematite would normally show up as well. So on the right side, you see a similar scenario, but it's a bit reversed, because in this case, fluids are moving from the sandstone down into the fractures. So these are both of the two typical models we try to keep in mind while we're looking for these deposits. Again, you're going to see different types of clays and chlorites and other minerals showing up in your alteration system, and based on what minerals you're seeing and what clays you're seeing, sort of gives you an indication of where in this package you might be in relation to the potential deposit. Now, why we wanted to focus in on the alteration as well, the majority of the uranium deposits that have been found by first identifying alteration and following it. It has happened, but it's been rare that a uranium deposit has been found by drilling right into it right off the bat and not chasing the alteration. Like I said, it has happened. One key deposit that would be an indicator of that would be Cigar Lake. It was drilled right into on the first hole without chasing the alteration first. But other deposits like MacArthur, Key Lake, Millennium, even the Phoenix deposit, alteration was identified first, then they chased it to the mineralization. So next slide, please, Alex. So a little bit focusing in on the G zone to sort of show why we're interested in it and why we're still drilling in this area. The south end of the G zone, we had, as I mentioned, the hydrothermal hematite come into the system. We're starting to see it in the bottom 3 and 4 holes. We also started to see elevated uranium. Now, I'm also going to talk about thorium here a bit. And why I mentioned thorium is typically in the unaltered basement rocks, we would see a significant amount of thorium as well as a little bit of uranium. But you typically see it on the order of 5 times more thorium than you would see uranium. So anytime we're talking about thorium and uranium together, we do a ratio of it where we can see how that pans out. And if it's about 0.2, 0.3, that would be normally where you'd expect to see. Anything higher than that, you're seeing enriched uranium compared to the thorium. So that's a good sign that, you know, we're starting to see more uranium dropping out of the system. And that's what we're seeing at the south end of the G zone here. In hole 37, which is the northern of the 4 circled holes, northern holes there, you're seeing 1.5 times the expected values, the expected uranium thorium ratio we would see in this area. You know, you're seeing 14.6 ppm uranium. We're seeing a uranium thorium ratio of 1.5. So, you know, this is a significant uranium enrichment. Small values still, but the fact that the uranium enrichment is there is very encouraging. Hole 32 at the south end also showing us higher uranium ppm values, and we're still seeing a uranium thorium ratio of 0.8, so it's still significantly higher than what the normal background ratios would be. Next slide, Alex. Now, when we move over onto the K zone, here we're seeing extensive hydrothermal hematite alteration as well. We're seeing some white clay starting to come into the system in the middle of the package of holes. And what was significant here on this trend as well is in the north end of the K zone, the first hole we tried to drill, we intersected significant structure in the rocks, and it was actually the first hole we lost on these trends because the ground was so broken up and so altered we couldn't drill through it. So we had to start over and try again. The drill just couldn't get through it. So we moved a little bit, tried again, and managed to complete a hole down through our target. And we're finding elevated radioactivity, significant uranium values again as well, and a uranium thorium ratio in the order of 1.2. So again, quite a bit higher than we'd expect. And this was very encouraging. We're seeing, as I said, graphitic structures with alteration, with elevated radioactivity, and verification that elevated radioactivity is actually uranium. Next slide, Alex. On to the H zone. Again, same thing we're seeing. 3 holes completed. All 3 holes are altered. We're in a slightly different structural setting here because we're starting to see a shift in our conductors from a north-south trend through the K zone and down into the H zone. And we're starting to swing back to the northwest as we proceed south as well. So bends in the conductors, normally they don't bend. They would typically break around this corner, usually with an offsetting cross structure. All that information, all that structure tends to give a lot more broken up ground, which we're seeing. So a lot more room for fluids to move through the rocks and interact with our graphitic packages and start dropping out the uranium we're looking for. So we're encouraged that this zone should return something as well. We are also going to be checking because we're not sure if the K zone and the H zones are part of the same trend or if they're 2 separate alteration zones. So there will be some drilling done between these zones as well to hopefully see whether they're joined and whether there's potential in between the 2 zones. Because anytime we see a bend in the trend of the conductors and structures, that becomes a prime target because things are changing. Fluids can pool and drop stuff out for us. Next slide, Alex. So for the program we're conducting right now, we currently have a drill turning in the field at the moment. It's on its 2nd drill hole. We have a 2nd drill moving onto site and we'll be drilling imminently. So we will have 2 drills turning. We have 1 drill operating on the south end of the G zone to follow up the results I just talked about a few minutes ago. And the 2nd drill is moving into the K zone to start following up results there and moving down towards the H zone. Now, as I've said, we've got good structure, good alteration, good elevated uranium. We're checking off all these boxes, showing us that we're where we want to be. And as long as we keep going where the rocks tell us to go, we have a really good chance of getting into something good. So the current program we're running will be approximately 5,000 meter program. Should be completed sometime in March.
Perfect. Well done, Trevor. We'll go to the next slide, which is our we'll just briefly go over Hatchet Lake. This is a 2nd project for us. We wanted something that we might be able to drill outside of the small window that we have in the southwestern portion of the basin. I should mention that window can extend and grow once discovery is made. There are reasons for that, but typically, once you find something, things tend to change, and one of the things we are is very respectful of local communities, and we don't want to drill in the summer and force that issue, because that's when the ground is used recreationally for trapping, for hunting, for fishing, and the local communities are out and about, obviously. But that can change upon impactful discovery. So we're really hopeful that we'll be able to open up over time at East Preston, but in the northern portion as well here. Again, you have we wanted something that we could perhaps drill outside of those 3 months, and we can do that at Hatchet Lake. Now, we wanted to get onto Hatchet last year, and earlier this, well, at the end of 2022, and we didn't get that done. The First Nations consultation's lengthier, and there are reasons for that. Mainly, no one has done any real work on the project for years. So, new roads have to be dealt with, new areas of concern have to be addressed for the local communities, and helicopter support and all that has to be, we have to work through that. We need to do that with First Nations support and cooperation. So we're in the process of getting that done. One of our neighbors in the area, Standard Uranium, has recently signed an exploration agreement with the local First Nations. So we know that things can get done, and that leads to a positive outcome for us. But we really like the project. It's in a great area, and I'll let Trevor address a little bit more as to why we chose this project over others.
All right, Alex. Thank you. So the Hatchet Lake project, as you can see on this map, we're now on the east side of the Athabasca Basin. This project exists up in the northeast corner. And now this is a fairly productive structural trend through the basin here. It's sort of referred to as the Wollaston-Mudjattic transition zone. It's where two large packages of rock have come together, and this is where the transition between these two large packages exists. A lot of structure trending in a northeasterly direction, fairly wide, and as you can see from this map, this structural corridor contains all of the currently producing mines and previous producing mines in the Athabasca Basin, except for Clough Lake, which was on the west side. So everything else major that's been produced on the east side has come out of this corridor. This is also where the two currently largest, highest grade deposits that are in production exist, in MacArthur River and Cigar Lake. So our property exists just outside the Athabasca Basin. So again, we don't have to worry about sandstone cover. We're looking for basement hosted targets. The outside the basin margin was ignored for many years. Initial exploration work was done in this area in the 60s and 70s. And then once the major discoveries within the basin, notably Rabbit Lake and Key Lake, were made, the focus started to be looking under the sandstone cover, and everything that was outside the sandstone just tended to get ignored. And it's only been in the past 10 to 15 years that we're starting to see people like us looking outside the basin again, and we're getting results. Various companies are getting results outside the basin. So there is the encouragement to continue looking outside the basin. Next slide, Alex. So as you can see, we're just outside the edge of the basin, on the edge of this transition zone. We're along strike from the Rough Rider and the newer Husky deposit. So Rough Rider is now owned by UEC, I believe, and they're looking at ways to, it's potential for production in the not too distant future. Husky, it's a little bit earlier stage deposit, but again, it's a recent discovery. We are on trend from those. We are also to the east of the recent hurricane discovery of IsoEnergy as well the last few years. So there's, between Hurricane and Husky, two recent discoveries, fairly advancing fairly quickly, which we are in the neighborhood of and along strike from. So it's a good indication that that our property could be containing something. So again, as I said, work in the 60s and 70s. a little bit in the early 80s, some minor drilling, but again, wasn't well targeted because they really didn't understand the model until after Key Lake was discovered as to exactly what they were looking for. So the drilling may not have been targeting the best areas. But next slide, Alex. So all the red dots on this map indicate where various soil samples, rock samples, and lake sediment samples were collected. And these all indicate where elevated uranium values were found. And of note here is that of all the samples collected, there was at least 24 boulder samples and rock samples that contained significant amounts of uranium, actually up to 2.4% uranium in one of the samples that came from the Upper Manson zone. So there's a lot of potential here. We've got radioactive boulders that a source has not been found for yet. And based on ice flow directions, which typically had the glaciers coming down from the northeast across the property, we're fairly confident that the source of these boulders is still on our property. We just have to get in there and drill and find the source. So we don't have to worry about sandstone cover, but we do still have to worry about some glacial till, which can be anywhere from 10 to 30 meters thick, depending on where exactly you are on the property. So, it's very encouraging. We just have to get on the property and get the work done. And consultation with the local communities will continue, and hopefully we'll get that resolved in the next few months.
Yeah, that's a great point. We're going to be really patient here with Hatchet because we value it as a great project. And we're gonna follow the process where it leads, and we're confident we're going to get through that process in a positive way, and we'll be able to drill Hatchet before too long. I know in the past we've had questions about the earn-in agreement with Valor Metals. That's the option holder. Everything's on hold in terms of our obligations for payments and share issuance until we can get a little bit further into the consultation process and have a clearer picture as to when we can drill. So really, it's nice that Valor is being a great partner and allowing us to work through the consultation process before we get into more obligations in terms of the earn-in. Next, okay, so a quick look at our capital structure. 227 million shares out. In some sectors, that's a cause for gasp. Not so really in the uranium sector. If you've been around like we have and spent the majority of your life as a public company in a brutal bear market, you're going to do a lot of dilutive financings. That's the nature of the game, unfortunately. But we were able to do what we did, which was earn the majority interest in East Preston prior to the market waking up, which it began to do at the end of 2021. Current cash on hand, just under 10 million. We have some receivables, and that'll help us keep that balance strong. And as you can see, major shareholder ownership, 30% or so is owned by institutional holders. So we have over 25 institutional funds invested in the company. Some of these are massive funds, some of these are small family office type funds, but they're all institutional investors. And for a company that is in the pre-discovery stage, to have this level of institutional support is almost unheard of. I say this a lot, but if you had come to me in 2017, 2018, and 2019, when were really, you couldn't rub two nickels in this sector, that we would have that level of institutional support within 2 or 3 years, I would have, especially prior to a drill hole changing the game, I would have said you're crazy. But here we are, and I think it speaks to A, the sector and where it's going, and B, the validity of East Preston as a legitimate exploration target. Typically, funds they want you to de-risk before they make their investments, and this hasn't necessarily been the case for us. So that's our deck. That's what we do. This is a bit of overview, and we're happy to answer questions. I know there's several. So Will, if you're listening, jump on in, and we'll get to answering some questions.
Great, great. Thanks, Alex, and thanks, Trevor, as well. You know, it was a very thorough presentation and a very exciting update. Thank you. As Alex said, we're now going to move into the Q&A portion of the webinar. And if you're interested in asking a question, you're logged into Zoom, you know, please submit it right through the Q&A module. We have had a couple of questions come in before and during the presentation, so let's get right to it. First question, Alex, is I think you alluded to it, or Trevor did actually, but how long does it actually take typically to make a uranium discovery? You know, and also just to tag on to that, how important is the discovery of alteration zones at East Preston?
Yeah, it's a good question, good two-parter, and you know, we need to consult the crystal ball here. It's funny, and as Trevor mentioned, you know, you can be lucky and hit it on the first hole. The majority of discoveries take time. You need to go through that checklist that Trevor alluded to, and we have done that. And every time we do work on the project, we check another box or keep pushing some of those boxes along in a really positive way. But Trevor can speak to some of the historical discoveries and how long they took to get to the big hole and the big discovery. So why don't you throw a couple of examples out there, Trevor?
Well, yeah, as you said, Alex, I mean, if we could accurately predict exactly how long a discovery would take, we'd all be rich. But the reality is, it can take time. Cigar Lake was an anomaly. It was found on the first hole of the first drill program in that area. So it can happen. You've got other discoveries that have been found in the first few holes, but then you've got MacArthur River, for example, 12 to 14 years and 195 drill holes. Phoenix Lake, 30 plus years and well over 200 drill holes to find Phoenix on the Wheeler River property. Arrow, I believe that was 20 some holes, if I recall correctly. So, and a few years time. So it takes time, and it really just depends on how well you pick your targets with the information you have, and how well you follow up what the rocks are telling you. And sometimes it can take time, sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
It can be really fast.
Yeah, sometimes there's luck involved.
There is luck involved.
I
as
would
well.
say if you hit it on the first hole, there's a lot of luck involved. That's just the reality. Now we're somewhere in the middle there. We don't anticipate 20 years of drilling. That's certainly not something we're looking at. We're getting closer every time we do the work, as mentioned, specifically last year, which leads to the second half of that first question, which is the alteration and the significance of it. The discovery of those alteration zones was incredibly impactful. It's changed the nature of this project. And Trevor's alluded to that and spoken to several key deposits that were found by chasing alteration. So our exploration model essentially changed last year when we ran into these alteration zones. It was really, now we know where we're concentrating, we know what we have, and one of the things I'd like to speak to here is sometimes if you have, you know, a couple of 100 meters of alteration, well, now you've really bullseyed where you're going to go. With 1,700 meters and growing, it's a bit of a conundrum. It's a good one to have. But we've got a lot of ground now that becomes high priority ground, so that's part of what we're dealing with as well. But you know, what was the specific second half of that question, Will? I want to make sure we answer it accurately.
Yep. How important is this discovery of alteration zones?
Yeah. Okay. So I think I've spoken to that, Trevor. We speak to it a lot, and you have to have it. It's a great model to finding big deposits, and you know, now that we had it, it's changed the nature of this project. It's de-risked it and made it so much more compelling to have that much alteration and to have exactly what you need to find something of importance. So, okay, there you go.
That's great. You basically answered the next question, which is really, you know, how is your confidence level? And it's obviously growing quite dramatically, especially with the discovery of the alteration zones. And I think that also leads into the next question, which is, you've had a neighbor in your basin have some positive news recently. It's Fission 3.0. How does their recent discovery impact Azincourt?
Yeah, well, I'll speak to that quickly here. And anytime anybody makes discovery in your neighborhood, that's good for you, and it's good for everybody in the area. It proves that the ground is fertile, that there are discoveries to be made, and so we were pleased to see that, and it just reinforces our exploration plans. One of the reasons, when we first looked at this project back in 2017, when I got involved, none of the work, none of the geophysics, none of the geochem had really been done in any significant way. And now to get to this point where you're looking at that, I mean, it's changed dramatically. It's a great area. Now we have discovery in the neighborhood, and Fission 3.0 isn't the only one. Trevor can speak to the others in the area as well, but it's really good for us, and it shows that the ground is fertile and we're in the right area.
Oh,
Great.
Exactly. That's all you can say is, it shows that this area still has lots of potential.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Next question is regarding Hatchet Lake, an update there, which we had, I think you provided.
Yeah.
Just correct me if I'm wrong. The first part of the question is, are all the payments up to date at Hatchet Lake? And you mentioned that that's on pause for now, and we're all good there.
Yes, we are up to date, and Valor is being a really good partner in allowing us to sort through the consultation process before any further obligations are to be met.
And the second part of that question was negotiations with First Nations. You said that is going well. One of your neighbors has had recent positive news, and that you expect some news within the next month or two.
Yeah,
Well, it'll be a few months yet, I'm sure. They told us they didn't want to talk to us till the new year. Now it's the new year. We've been talking with the Yathinene, which is the organization that represents the communities in the area, and now we're just trying to get that actual face-to-face meeting with the actual community members. So
it's a process.
It's a process, yes.
And you follow it, and sometimes the timelines can stretch, but we really like the project, and we're going to follow the process here because we think it's well worth it.
Yeah, and we've learned in the past too. This is one of those processes you can't push. It happens as it happens, because if we push them, they'll shut down and we'll get nowhere.
Yeah. So we do it the right way, and everyone will benefit.
Mm-hmm.
That's perfect. A couple of I'm going to combine a few more just in the in looking at our time here.
Yeah.
2023 goals. Are you financed for that? How's the drill program financed?
Yeah.
Use of proceeds from any cash raises if you need to, and catalysts coming up to 2023.
Yeah, lots to unpack there, but definitely we are funded for this drill program and beyond. Having said that, the big caveat is we're still an exploration stage company. And one thing I learned very early in this business is when there's funding for exploration stage companies, you take it. So are we going to finance? Potentially, yes. If the funds want to re-up, we will. And that's a good thing. That allows us to continue to drill. It keeps us moving the projects forward. These are multi-million-dollar drill programs. They are not cheap. We need to continue to fund those. And as long as we have the support to do it, we will. Now, having said that, again, we almost have $10 million in the bank. We're going to hover around this. After this drill program, we'll be down around the 6.5 range. So, we still have plenty of money in the bank and lots to do moving forward. Catalyst, simply drill, see where that leads, what kind of results come out of this. We want to continue to push the project forward incrementally. We're not you know, we are, to be explorationists, you are a bit of a dreamer. Okay. That's what you do. You're treasure hunting, but you also have to be a realist. And you know, I'm a worst case scenario guy. All I really want to see is that we're pushing everything forward. We're continuing to see what we need to see. We'd love to have that big hole sooner rather than later. We're like anybody else. We're shareholders and we're vested in this. But we're prepared to go through the process. It can take some time. I just want to see things continue to move forward. Again, we're going to drill through March, get into March here, get our results probably May, June, depending on lab backup. Last year was pretty bad. I don't know what this year looks like yet. Hopefully we'll get through it quickly, and then we move from there. And hopefully we'll have some summer work to discuss, to talk to. Maybe Hatchet Lake will begin to formulate. We can get something done in the fall at Hatchet, but we'll continue to move forward. And I should also mention, we have been looking at other projects. We don't need them, but since the market turned in 2022, projects have shown up on our radar, and this is a good time to look. I wouldn't suggest that we're eager, but we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we didn't really kick the tires and look under the hood of some of these things that come across our desk. So that hopefully answers the question. If there's anything I missed, I'm happy to follow up.
No, I think you got it. We did have another question come in very similar, but maybe if we just give a quick bullet point summary here. The question is, what is the long-term plan for Azincourt and major milestones that we can expect over the next year? And that's the last question. So,
yeah, no, look, I think really what we want is we want a whole that changes us, that changes the focus from to delineation. And that's because we're still exploration. To get to delineation, we need to find significant mineralization. Once we find it, now everything focuses on that mineralization. How big is it? Where is it? How deep is it? Does it continue? In which direction? What, those types of things need to be answered. But that changes dramatically from where we're at today, which is, poking holes into these alteration zones. It changes once you hit the mineralization. Now you're focused in that specific area.
Great. Well, thanks, Alex and Trevor, and thanks everyone for joining today's webinar. It will be available on Azincourt's website shortly. And if you have any additional questions that was not addressed on the webinar, please feel free to email us at azincourt@rbmilestone.com. That's azincourt@rbmilestone.com. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks, guys, gentlemen, for the presentation. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
All right. Thanks all. Appreciate it, Will. And thank you, Trevor.
Thank you for having us.